Welcome to my humble abode. I'm Yoki the Tail Spinner, and this is Tales Over Coffee, where we start the day together with a narrative game and a cup of coffee in the hope of welcoming a blessed day. We return now to Mariupol, the third and final Ukraine war stories. In the end, both Miller and Hindu would live. We put the metal we extracted on the same tray, ugly edged shell fragments next to a single warped and blood-drenched 7.62mm bullet. It was grisly, but it was testament to the two lives saved. It didn't take long for the entire hospital to learn about it. In little Danya, what we had done there made me a superhero. After some negotiations, they even agreed that Anya was a hero as well, and not just my sidekick. Victor, however, was less amused. That evening he discreetly approached me. We must save who we can without taking risks or overstretching ourselves. As far as everybody else is concerned, you and Anya just got severely disciplined, understood? All I could muster was an apologetic nod. We did save what we could, Victor. And everything is a risk. Rules are important that works. Rules are something that works for most people most of the time. If you don't talk about this case too much. He gave me a small pat on the shoulder before walking away. Maybe when you're 60, then it'll make a fine legend. Not changing parameters. The shelling of the hospital and the heavy influx of patients made us alter the normal procedures. The patients from the destroyed wing were moved to the intact part, resulting in overcrowding. Some operating rooms got damaged too, cutting our total number of them. At least, the remaining ones were warmer and safer. We were quickly running out of supplies, however. Our supply manager Ola used to be irresponsible, but he was still missing. As Victor's de facto right-hand man, I took the matter into my own hands. I went through all his paperwork and found several phone numbers for the paramedics and warehouses supplying us. The lines were all dead, however. Our only remaining option was to go out into the city. That came with the risk of being caught in the open, or worse, coming face to face with Russians. And we'd heard plenty of stories by now. Anybody who wasn't one of their own, Russians shoot to kill. But we had no other option. At first, the away team was supposed to be me and two colleagues, but at the last moment Anya decided to join us. I failed to talk her out of it. On our way out, Victor approached us. Dima, take this. Leave this somewhere visible. It was a signal. It was a signed and sealed receipt from the hospital, claiming we were obliged to compensate the pharmacy's owner after the war was over. Victor really was a Soviet man, down to his love for largely meaningless bureaucracy. Hell, what if neither the pharmacy nor its owner would even survive the war? Still, I promised to leave the receipt as ordered. The trek to the drugstore took a long time. As we moved slowly and carefully, alert at all times, we watched our step obsessively, as by now there were thousands of mines and unexploded shells scattered around the city. My biggest worry this whole time was whether the pharmacy had even survived. Where would we even get more medicine if it didn't? Thankfully it was intact and miraculously hadn't even been looted. We broke the lock and filled our bags to the top, and our journey back became eventful. And it was the first to pick up on the noise of the approaching planes. We dashed towards the heavily damaged houses on the right side of the road, hoping the Russians wouldn't want to bomb that ruin of a second time. The houses on either side of the road were occupied, with someone's laundry drying on one of the balconies. Two planes popped out from behind the clouds and zoomed past us, forcing us to duck. A brief whistling sound cut through the air, and then the ground shook. The 5-story building before us exploded into fire and smoke. I saw Anya cover her head and scream, but I couldn't hear it. The explosion shook my hearing for a few moments. We hunkered down as broken bricks and glass showered our shelter. It took us a minute to overcome Let's come to our senses. My ears were ringing, and I was seeing double. But I forced myself to my feet. I checked up on the others and found no blood, so I turned to the building across the road. It was a horrifying sight. At least half the building had sunk, with a large chunk of it blasted apart. The heat of it assaulted my face. My hearing returned abruptly. A wave of screaming and wailing. Out of the smoking ruins emerged the survivors. A man carrying a broken, bloodied shape of a teenage boy. A young woman sitting in the dirt, staring at her right leg torn off at the knee. An old woman stumbling forward, covering her bloody, ruined face. I heard Anya's distraught gasp. She was right behind me. Dima, we have to help them. We have to help them. I knew she was right, but I also knew we were carrying the precious medicine we needed at the hospital. And if we didn't bring it back, there would be many more victims. The rest of the team looking at me. Yeah. There is no right choice. Let's split up. You take some back, I'll try and help here. I considered our options and turned to the other two surgeons. Take half the bags and go back. Me and Anya will help the wounded and be right behind you. A mere presence cheered up the survivors, I could tell. We spent the rest of the day at the ruined house, helping however we could. Between the two of us, we could only help so much, and yet we managed to treat or stabilize most of the survivors. Fitness up to 2, provided help up to 3. Dima's mood down to 2. Take him away, it's over. Watching the nurse cover the body, I wiped the sweat off my forehead and noted down the time of death. This was the second fatality since the last shelling. I don't know what was worse, losing people quickly, or having wounded that were beyond help. I spent more than 24 hours in the operating room, treating patients one after another. Pulled 5 from the brink of death, couldn't save the 6th one. My hands were shaking from strain and my eyes burned as if filled with fine sand. I quit smoking a couple of years ago when me and Anya started dating, but now really use a damn smoke. I decided to take a short break, just wash my face and get my thoughts in order. But just as I returned to my sleeping spot, a new problem emerged. Danny was nowhere to be found. Usually he stayed in my room while I worked, though usually we never left him alone for so long. I asked around and found out he had come looking for me some time ago. Oh God, he's dead, isn't he? Right after the shelling. Worried out of his mind apparently, asking if anybody had seen me. They told him I was busy. Nobody knew where he went after that. When Anya learned Danny was missing, she was out of her mind with worry. She couldn't come to join the search, as she had patients to attend to, but I promised I'd let her know if I found Dania. I went through the hospital room by room, and still couldn't find the boy. Only one place left unchecked, the ruined wing. I walked the empty, dust-covered halls, my mind constantly drifting back to how full of light the place had been just a month ago. Lost in thought, at first I didn't notice the quiet whimpering from one of the rooms. I peeked inside and finally saw Dania. He's alive. He was in a corner, curled up in a ball, his shoulders shaking. Hey there, kid. I was worried, you know. I crouched over him. Why'd you run off? Dania looked at me with wet eyes and pointed toward the other end of the room. There, among the pieces of a collapsed wall, I saw a human hand. It led to a half-buried shape in the shadows. I walked closer and moved some pieces of the rubble away. Then some more, then I froze. It was Ole, the supply manager. Gaunt, desiccated, staring at me with glassy eyes. He's dead? Daniel's quiet voice made me shudder. Is that what happened to Mum and Dad? We all received training on speaking to relatives of those who did not survive, but that was for adults. This was just a kid. What was I supposed to tell him? I don't know that I can. Normally I'd say explain death, but in this situation I don't know. I sat down next to Danya and gave him a careful hug. Best if I handle this on my own without involving Anya. Sometimes people leave us. It will happen to everybody eventually, but sometimes it happens too early. Because of disease or an accident or because of other people. That's what happened to Oli and your mum and dad too, sadly. He's named other people? Why would they do that? I wish I knew. Hell, I wish I was on every Ukrainian's mind. I think it was on every Ukrainian's mind. Why did the Russians do this to us? To all the propaganda? Because this was the only thing they knew how to do well? Because this was their rotten fucking nature? Probably all of it at once, but it wouldn't help the kid if I told him as much. Buddy, I don't know. But it will be over sooner or later, and we'll all be able to come home. I helped him up to his feet and gave him a gentle pat on the head. Let's not tell Anya about any of this, okay? It'll be our secret. Daniel nodded, still sniffing. Before going back to the operating room, I stopped by Victor's office. We had to bury Ole. He was down to 1. Daniel remains at 3. Daniel's support. This event was caused by your previous actions. Dima, how did you become a doctor? Danny asked while I was filling out the patient cards. I didn't even have to think about it. Always liked the idea. I wasn't squeamish. Had good grades in biology and I wanted to do something important, and I knew doctors made good money. I shrugged, smiling, but the main reason is the job is literally about saving people. What's not to like? Daniel nodded and thought, with a thoughtful look, charmingly serious for his age, but I could tell my answer got him thinking. Usually he'd ask about stuff because he was bored. The hospital affairs didn't involve him, but there was very little to hold his attention. This time, it wasn't idle curiosity. I could tell there was something he wanted to discuss, but I didn't want to be blunt about it. Who do you want to be when you grow up? An archaeologist, I think. I love dinosaurs, they're so cool. I chuckled. He got that right, dinosaurs are so freaking cool. But I think I want to help people like you do. He hopped closer. Can you show me how to do it? I'll be a doctor too. Huh? The boy looked up to me. He really did. And somehow I never noticed. There was no way I could say no to him. That's so. In that case, make him an intern for the day. Dima's mood goes up. Mum and I explained to him what an intern was. The initially confused Danya burst with enthusiasm. Yeah, that would be cool. I quickly finished up with the patient's cards. Luckily, Danya was a lot more patient than your average 6-year-old. And from there, I set about teaching him the doctor's trade. We went over first aid and the basics of anatomy. Nothing too advanced. And Danya lapped it up with genuine interest. He was frankly more interested in it than some of the people I used to study medicine with. Once the lecture was over, I decided to reward Danya somehow. Congratulations, young man. You made it as an intern in our clinic. Sadly, we're a bit short on fitting scrubs, but I've got something even better for you. I found my old stethoscope and solemnly put it on him like a medal. Danny was overjoyed. He puffed out his chest like a little bird, then rushed to give me a grateful hug. I smiled and gave Danya a pat on the head. It felt oddly satisfying knowing I may have sparked the kid's interest in medicine. I had completely forgotten how clever he was. I'd have to talk to him more often. Boots up. For once on a happy note, we'll end there for today. Join us tomorrow when we'll continue with the story of Mariupol and Anya's work at the hospital. Possibly with Danya's too. See you then.